I'm just going to give you a roundabout picture of the journey that IU has been on in the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we have a group at IU that came together around May of 2020 with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd and the racial reckoning that was happening across the country. And we had staff members who came up at work and said, hey, why are we talking about this? What are we doing? They're talking about it in the world, they're talking about it at IU on the academic side, but why aren't we talking about it as a team and as a function in capital planning and facilities? And I said, you know what, you're right. We should be talking about this. It impacts how we all come to work every day. And what does happen outside does impact what happens inside the work environment. So those of you believers who feel that, you can check it at the door and then it's not going to impact you, life outside isn't going to impact you when you show up at work, we're going to have a discussion later. We can meet out over another beer and we'll talk about how that's really not, in my viewpoint, a reality for people. So with that conversation, we spent a lot of time in-house, and we had a group of staff who raised their hand and said, hey, I want to talk. I want to be a part of a group. Let's do this. And so we came up with an in-house, it's called the Diversity and Advocacy Team, affectionately known as DAT. And we sat down with our boss, and my boss is Vice President Tom Morrison, and he and I talked a lot about how do we address this topic, right? How do we allow staff to have a conversation in the work environment? How do we move it from discussion and debate into dialogue? How do we create an environment where people feel they can really bring their whole self to work? And so this is just a little piece. He wrote a letter to our team. And in that letter, he talked about a lot of different things. But the thing that I think is the most important is one that we acknowledge not everyone is offered the same opportunity, and that the way we speak and the way we behave in the work environment does impact how people are able to truly do their work. And then the other piece is that every single team member impacts behavior change. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about it comes from the top, it comes from the top. No, it comes from the entire environment. The leadership has to be present, leadership has to support it, but it is not solely leadership's responsibility to change work environments. It comes from when you're navigating with somebody directly day to day. It's how the two staff members who are out there on the job site during the day, it's how they talk to each other. Not because I showed up and I'm in leadership, but it's how they choose to interact. And so we said, okay, this sets some initial boundaries. This sets some initial guidance that we can start doing. So in 2020, we really kicked off. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what does DEI work in capital planning facilities look like. In 2021, we started requiring, so as you come in our onboarding process, everybody goes through training, right? That's that low-hanging fruit. You can mark off, oh, training, that's great. What we also realized was, though, that we have to have more conversations after we've had training. This is not just about checking the box, it's about what it looks like. And then in spring of 22, we actually did what are called road shows. And that's where our diversity and advocacy team, not CPF Human Resources and not CPF Leadership, but this volunteer group of people came together and they went out and met with every single team within our portfolio. On a good day, we used to have close to 700, and the reality that is our life now, we're barely scratching a little more than about 580. But that group went out to talk exactly about how you can impact behavior change colleague to colleague and how we can do better. So a couple of the things that we are doing that this group has come up with is, one, they've created, those beautiful statements that look so good in print. And then they talk about sometimes big words. And so one of the challenges I've had back to the DAT is, this looks beautiful on our website. But if we went out and asked a staff member right now, can they tell you what number one means? What is in their words? We've got to do a better job of sometimes simplifying it down. What is the core piece of this, right? Which is about how do we embrace our differences? Not how do we hide them, not how do we maybe bring it out at a one time, but how do you be yourself every day at work? How do you bring your whole self in? How do we ensure that everyone feels welcomed, valued, included? It does not matter what that difference is. That when you are here, you feel heard, you feel listened to, that you can have a discussion, you can have dialogue with people. Sometimes you can even have a good debate. Maybe you're not going to see it the same way, but can you do that respectfully? This is about leadership and about your university, your group setting a boundary. People don't know boundaries. We have to teach boundaries. And then it also is about understanding what, the third is about what the DAT is going to do. What is their job? Their job is to support our underrepresented colleagues and provide a safe space. And people define safe spaces differently. And that is part of the journey that as leaders over groups who are doing DEI work, you have to help people understand how do they define what a safe space is. Safe space for me could be very differently than a safe space for someone else. DEI work is personal. If you want it to be long-term, it has to become personal. It can't be broad brush because that's how people feel included. Some of the other things, this just talks a little bit again about what, it's a grassroots kind of staff founded it. It's staff-based. They choose who's on the team. They choose who's not on the team. My role as their executive sponsor is to make sure they operate within a certain level of boundaries. And we're going to talk a little bit about those challenges that come with navigating boundaries around this topic. But it's a wonderful environment in which we have really seen true differences impact our workspace. These are some of the different types of activities that our diversity and advocacy team does. They do a monthly newsletter. They talk about events. They talk about how you can join the conversation, things of awareness that are going on, whether it's nationally, whether it's within the state, whether it's within the university, opportunities for people to engage. We have brave conversations, so they started a book club. And they also started, we have a little, it's called our lending library. And we actually just changed some things up because after they went out and did their road shows, what they found was while that library is available to those who report out of our main location, we're not getting access to that to all of our staff who work different shifts and who work out of our satellite locations. So now we've navigated how we can get that information out, how we can send books out. Think of if you have a bookmobile in your local communities, we're now doing that here. They have made it a point to cover material that talks about every variety of DEI topic. And we have, one of my favorites is a book that's a children's book about my dad as a janitor. And they have different ones that talk about graphic novels. They have fiction, they have nonfiction. They have got every genre as a way to give people an opportunity to educate themselves. And so these are just some ways in which this DEI conversation can go. This is the structure that we have in place. So I stay out of all of their, nomination business and their selection business, but they have a chair, a secretary, a treasurer. We always, of course, tie back to that student mission. One, we are a better organization the more that facilities can get your students from your campus environment involved in your unit. I encourage you keep doing that. One, they provide a perspective that is much needed to us. Two, they challenge you to think differently. And three, we have to keep them in mind. But if, in our environment, where our facilities function is based, we're not in campus proper. They got us out on the outskirts. So we miss that interaction of the student mind, right? And seeing what they're thinking about, how they navigate our space. So the more you can have interns in your environment, great. Different committee chairs that they have, again, these are all volunteers. None of these are people that are, we don't have, I take that back. I just posted a full-time DEI position. So we are the first staff or administrative function to have an in-house DEI position. Every other DEI position in the IU system is tied to academics. And so why? Because this is important. And we have said this is a priority for us. And so now this will actually help as we navigate all of these wonderful volunteers and sometimes the challenges that are presented. So This is the main context of this conversation. And it's a good thing because I'm already down to less than 10 minutes. And I'm watching, Nicole's going to give me the wave over there to tell me to get going. These are some of the things that I have found as the sponsor of this group, because when you talk about advocacy, advocacy has a very strong tie to it, right? It has for a lot of people, if you're advocating for something, right, there's an emotional tie. There's a purposefulness. There's a feeling around that word. It's not just work you are excited about or part of the job that you do. When you are advocating, you come at it with a different mind. And so trying to balance people who are doing advocacy work in and above and beyond their standard daily work duties. Our chair is a space planner. We have architects on there, we have engineers on there, we have administrative staff on there, we have facility operations professionals. That's their full-time job. What they do for DEI, though, they do it above and beyond. And I can tell you, they are putting a lot of time and effort into creating the volume of programming that we are doing. And so as the executive sponsor for that, my job is to make sure I help them balance. And as we've done this we're about into our 2.5 years into this, one of the challenges that because it's a thing that they really enjoy, right, they're passionate about DEI topics, all of a sudden that's taking priority. And with our current chair, we've had to have a little bit of a performance conversation, right? Because she was telling her boss, like, oh, I can't attend that meeting. I'm working on DAT stuff. Okay, all right. But then that became more like that was happening every week, right? And then as we started talking to staff, it's like, oh, well, I spend about 20% of my time, 30% of my time on DEI work. And it's like, well, all right, we got to remember, what's your priority? You were hired to be this. And while this is exciting, right, this is work that they're enjoying, how do we balance that out? So that is another reason why we actually have built and created an in-house DEI position, because it's going to take a lot of the work that this team has just voluntarily navigated and done. That position will navigate that, and now they get to join it for fun. They're not doing it for their work. Now they're doing it because they enjoy taking this topic further with us. One of the other challenges that come with advocates, right, is sometimes this becomes personal, right? They have a personal buy-in, a personal interest, maybe a personal stake in why they want to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the environment. And so when you're advocating for something, sometimes we can come off a little strong, we get a little excited about it, and because it's passionate. When you do that, you have to be mindful at work. Sometimes you can make people defensive immediately. One of the things that I think is a win for us on this is in the beginning, we had to have a little boundary conversation, right? About no, you cannot use the university's, our email address book to talk about political stances. We're not going to talk about legislation. Right, we had to set that boundary because they wanted to talk about some bills that were going through and say, on behalf of Dad, we should be talking about why this is important. And I said, no. This is not about that. This is work. And this is about what would IU do, right? Not about what Jamie would do, but what would IU do on this topic? And so as a leader, you will have to find, again, when you are talking about somebody who's advocating, that's something you have to help them balance about. If you want to take and you've got friends from work that you want to send and you do it on your own social media and you connect to them that way, great. But we're not going to push this out, to our colleagues. We're not going to put political things and that type of work in our newsletters. We have to balance that. But one of the things that I think was really exciting when you talk about advocacy is we've actually been able to have conversations. So they do lunch and learns. And during that lunch and learn, the last one we talked about was the topic of privilege. And that's a very topic that has a lot of viewpoints around it, right? And a lot of emotional tie to, and it's one where in our environment, we are, roughly our numbers are 90% male and about 85% white. And so the group that came together, again, they came on their own lunch hour. We had from our AVPs down to frontline staff participating. There were about 15 people in the conversation. They watched a video and then they talked about privilege. And what does privilege mean? And I was so incredibly proud of this group because some people were pretty strong in their beliefs. Some were pretty quiet, but they allowed each other the space to come forward and talk about it. They had some very frank conversations that we could have never, 2 years ago, we could have never had this conversation. It would have led to an immediate defensiveness and a desire to argue, not to listen, not to hear different opinions. And so it is one thing that I can say where as you coach your team members through topics of this nature, you can get to a point where you will see progress. And that part I'm excited about because, again, the emotion that comes with advocacy allows you to also navigate your organization's direction. DEI is important to us. It's just how do we balance it? The other is about recognizing you want expectation for quick action. Right? Within the first year, we had navigated all the low-hanging fruit. We had required training in place. We had had conversations with all of the management team members. We had had a conversation with all of our staff members. We had put together the library. We had put together our outline of expectations. Okay, so now we did a survey. Well, wait a minute. There were still problems in the work environment, right? We were still having cases that said that we were missing the mark in some areas. Some people still weren't wanting to talk about this topic. Trying to balance, again, this is about advocacy, balancing people's expectation that this is about the long game. This is not about a short conversation. We can do this, require this, but inclusive environments come from a commitment of all to change that behavior. And that takes time. Everyone in here knows how long it takes to navigate culture change. So the team gets disengaged, I won't say disengaged, they just got a little loss of motivation, got a little bummed out, and we really had to sit back and say, hold on, wait, look what you have done, right? Remind people of where they have had successes. And that, again, we're not looking for this for quick results. We've been talking about needing a full-time DEI position for over a year. Had the funding squared away, guess what? Funding challenges, that came up. That funding source went away. It took me another 6 months to find another funding source. This has kind of became a sore topic for the team. I said, just have some, you got to give me an opportunity. Just know it's important, we'll get there. We finally did. But they wanted it within the first 6 months, not the first year and a half. That's part of helping them balance that quick action. Leadership commitment. Yes, this requires DEI and inclusive environments require everybody at every level to be committed. But leadership sets the tone. You all have to make sure when you're in a space and you see a behavior happening that does not align to what you are saying is important to you, you have to, point it out. And you can do that respectfully. You can do that privately. You can do that in front of a group sometimes you have to. You can ensure that somebody's feeling heard, feeling included. But it comes from leadership's commitment to that. And it is more than just the paper. It's more than Tom's letter. It is about his actions and behaviors, fiscally, leadership-wise, and operationally. And so you have to make sure that those things are happening. Growing the group has been a challenge. When we first started this, we had an excited team. We had probably 30, 40 people, and they were all in, and this was great, and they were excited, and they were part of it, and then, that slowly faded. We roughly have about 7 people who are doing all of this work, month in, month out. And we have about 20 in total who want to hear about it, and are involved at a peripheral level. We have almost 600 staff members. So this becomes now about saying, okay, we've got the core. We've got this certain group, but now how do we get one more? That's a challenge that leadership has the ability to help navigate, as well as how are we getting out there to those individual conversations with people so that they know how they can participate. They know how they can learn more if they want. Because the pressure is really hard if you keep it to that small group. It is too big of a topic to navigate on behalf of their other full-time work they're supposed to prioritize to do this. So finding opportunities, and that comes again from reaching out and having in-depth conversations. And then the other piece is this is about the long game. Goes back to the quick actions. We're not doing this like all these sustainability conversations we were having earlier. This is about what we do right now. Low-hanging fruit, got it. Easy to navigate. This is about culture change and commitment. And commitment is hard, and you're going to go through some really rough patches. You're going to have to be willing to disclose what is the reality of your numbers. What do your metrics look like? Own them. And then talk about how you're going to make a commitment to change it. But that change won't happen in 6 months. It may not happen in a year. But what is your plan for what you want this organization to look like 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years from now? Now, hopefully in 10 years, I'm still with the boss and IU, and I'm going to have an opportunity to come back to you and say, this is what it looks like 10 years from now. And because, unfortunately, 20 minutes is gone, and I feel like I'm just now getting wound up and started, I'm going to sit here with this beer, and we can have another conversation, should you like to. This is one of my favorite quotes. I think Dr. Maya Angelou is just an amazing woman, and she did a lot of great things in her time here on this earth. But this quote ties back to what we heard Lonnie talking about, right? And this is about putting yourself in other people's shoes and thinking about what is their reality. It does not matter. People will forget your words. You may not remember one word I said today. People will forget your behaviors, right? They may not remember what you actually did. But people never forget how you make them feel. Feelings, how you feel included at work, how you feel a sense of tie back to and belonging to your university, right? To your school, to your organization. Feelings are what keep people in an environment. How they feel a part of. And every one of us in here has the ability to navigate that every single day. You have the ability to stop, pause, make eye contact, say hello. How are you doing? Learn the names. Glenn, right? I talked to Glenn a little bit earlier. Learn the names of the people supporting you. Because how you interact with every level, again, people who are at a station above you, great, they're your equal. The ones in that who are at a level different than yours, treat them, I'm not going to say that's not a golden rule anymore. If you don't know about the platinum rule, we're going to have a whole nother conversation. But treat people the way they feel they want to be treated. And with that, peace out. She's cutting me off.